Happy Soil Health Week, everyone. Welcome to our session, What are Conservation Planners? My name is Hannah Tomlin, and I'm the Soil Health Outreach Associate with the AIM Initiative. I'd like to thank you all for joining us today and thank the Illinois Stewardship Alliance for their work in coordinating all the very exciting events on the schedule for this week. We currently have 3 Level 3 conservation planners on our team, and we'll be learning about the work they're doing in their offices. We will save questions for the end, but if you have a question that comes up during their presentations, feel free to pop it in the chat. Before we get started hearing from our planners, I'd like to introduce our grant coordinator, Kristen Heaton, to provide some background on our program and the steps to becoming Level 3 certified.
Good morning, everyone. Hannah, thank you for all your work that you've done to put this panel together. So the producers across Illinois are our front lines of ensuring global food security and protecting the state's land and water and other natural resources for future generations. And conservation districts, along with the Illinois Department of Agriculture, play a critical role in achieving this goal by providing producers with technical assistance, resources, and tools to improve effective conservation practices on their lands. IDA, through the Partners of Conservation program, support all 97 conservation districts across the state. And these conservation district professionals are trusted advisors within the local communities and play a key role in educating producers, facilitating the conservation planning process, and working with producers to design and implement the most effective conservation system for their operations. The USDA's Natural Resource Conservation Service staff, in coordination with partners such as the State of Illinois Department of Ag and Department of Natural Resources, implement critical USDA conservation programs like EQIP and CRP. These programs provide resources and allow farmers and foresters to conserve land and water and protect water quality and improve soil health. As producer demand for conservation grows, resources and staff for our federal and local conservation workforces are often stretched thin. Over the past decade, USDA and their conservation partners have struggled to keep staffing levels on pace with attrition. The purpose of our initiative is to allow the Illinois Department of Agriculture and the Natural Resource Conservation Service to address conservation staffing capacity challenges and expand nutrient loss reduction strategies in Illinois, increase Conservation Reserve Program technical assistance to Illinois CRP participants, and to increase general conservation planning assistance to Illinois landowners, users, and producers. To become a Conservation Planner Level 3, a conservation planner must complete online classes through AgLearn, complete hands-on and in-person training, state-specific trainings, and required deliverables. This is a long process and requires a lot of dedication from our conservation planners. And that's what I got.
Thank you, Kristen. Thank you, Kristen. I wasn't sure if you were done or not.
Nope.
Thank you. So our first planner we're going to hear from, he was the first one to become Level 3 certified back in November of 2024, and he's doing very impressive work for farmers in Knox County. So I'm excited to have him share his work with you. So Tim Blackwell.
Thanks, Hannah. It's a pleasure to be here today and be able to speak on Soil Health Week and the work that we're doing here in Knox County. Most of the pictures you'll see in my presentation today come from my work that I'm doing out in the field, so it's a pleasure to be able to share those with you. But just a little bit of background from myself. As shared, I'm in the Galesburg field office here in Knox County. For those not familiar, we're about an hour west from Peoria, hour south from the Quad Cities, and an hour north from Macomb is kind of where we're situated up here in Galesburg, at least in Knox County. I joined this program back in May of 2023, so I'm coming up on my 2 years here just in a couple months, and it's been a great journey. And as you can see up on the screen, I have a bachelor's degree in history, so not a traditional path into agriculture, to say the least. So it's been enjoyable for me to move into a new career and experience that and all that comes with along the way, and learning all the different challenges. And I like to say that, you know, in history, I moved into the field of public history and worked with the National Park Service. And the work that we did is we were, you know, stewards of the stories, right? Preserving stories, preserving history. And the work that we're doing here today, we're stewards of the land and helping our farmers and our producers protect their land and our natural resource, the soil. Another one of the things that got me into this is my fiance's family are multi-generational farmers. And up on the screen, there's a picture of their family farm in Fulton County. But we can go ahead and move to the next slide here and kind of dive into the work, right? Collaboration is one of the greatest things that we get to participate in our office. We're working, directly with our soil and water conservation districts, our NRCS and FSA offices, and our other partner organizations like ANGREC and Pheasants Forever. So on a daily basis, we're all working towards that same goal of putting conservation on the ground. We're taking farmers' ideas and we're taking those concepts and those plans and turning those towards implementation. So we're providing them education, we're educating the youth through different events that we do, and overall just spreading the word of conservation to folks there. Picture me helping out with one of the fish sales. We'll move on to the next slide here. Some other things that I'm able to collaborate with a daily basis, and one of my greatest kind of success stories, or one of the greatest things to be a part of so far in this job, is up in the top left-hand corner. That's a picture from our Knox County Soil and Water's annual meeting. They did it out at a folks neighborhood farms. He originally came when I first started on the job, about 2 months in, worked with the producer to put in some CRP, taking a large 35-acre field out of production, turning into native prairie grasses. And, this is the first time for him doing that and kind of walking him through the process and watching that grow. He got it dormant seeded last fall, so I'm kind of excited to go out there this spring. Probably going to be really weedy this part of the year as it comes up, but as it begins to develop and keep working with that producer and seeing that our Soil and Water was able to work with him as a venue and educate folks on pollinator habitat and other programs that we have available. And so that was some fun collaboration that I got to do in the office, working with that producer, working closely with our soil and water conservation districts. Collaboration overall is just such a huge part of the work that we do. But we can go ahead, next slide here, onto some of the resource concerns that we face here in Knox County. I think we're going to see kind of similar across the state, across all our presenters here today. We struggle, and when I look directly at kind of the work that I do with the CRP, the Conservation Reserve Program, looking directly at a lack of wildlife habitat. We have a large kind of expanse in the northwest portion of our county that's just corn and soybeans, not a lot of habitat, not a lot of vegetation for that wildlife to go. And so looking to provide them wildlife habitat while also reducing wildlife damage on farmers' crop fields, and how we can improve their yields by taking pieces out of production and providing that wildlife habitat back to those animals. We have water quality issues, looking at non-point source pollution, trying to keep our inputs on the field and not running off. And with runoff, we get erosion as a major issue here, as you can see in the picture. So, some steps that we're taking to address those with wildlife habitat, directly the CRP program. Water quality can also be achieved through CRP or other, EQIP practices, saturated buffers, things like that, trying to get those runoff and those pollutants out of our water, our waterways. And then the erosion is something, cover crops is becoming huge across the state, a huge initiative that we're pushing with PFC funds, EQIP funding, everything like that. CRP, that producer taking a 35-acre field that they don't want to farm anymore and just turning into, a native a grass planting or engineering practices for those who want to continue to farm, but do it in a way to preserve their topsoil. Next slide. These are just kind of a list of practices, we're commonly putting in place to help solve these issues. And by putting these practices on the ground, some huge impacts that I'm seeing, when it comes to CRP, I'm seeing a lot of repeat clients. We're getting people back in the office wanting to sign up more pieces, seeing the success and the benefits that it's having on their land. I think the biggest we see is field borders, people taking about 30 to 60 feet off either side of their field there and kind of shrinking in the field because they're already losing portions of that yield to wildlife damage, tree shade, everything like that. So trying to give themselves a more guaranteed income, something that they're losing profit off. Our farmers here are definitely seeing the benefits of those programs, and we're getting them back in, and we're getting them to sign up more and more pieces in the conservation. And with that comes word of mouth and getting their neighbors in and working with those producers, them saying, hey, I saw what my neighbor did. I really like what I see out there. How can I do that? And so that's kind of the one of the best parts of the job, right? Is spreading conservation. And along with getting more people in the office and actually getting the conservation on the ground, seeing the benefits of wildlife. I love doing stash reviews in the spring and the summer and just driving up and seeing the amount of nesting birds that will come out of a cool season grass stand, or, you know, the amount of times you get spooked by a deer that's just bedding down right next to you. It's just wonderful to see and actually see the effects of the conservation work that you're doing in the office. And again, you know, when I think of my county, what makes it unique is these producers that are spreading the word and the work that they're doing. They are getting their neighbors to come in. You know, we constantly have a workload here, and it's exciting to see that it's not something that's going to go away. Go to the next slide. These are just pictures of different CRP practices on the ground. That's my colleague and soil con here in the office on the upper right. It's a hunting blind sitting on CRP there, a more permanent structure. Just thought a fun picture to toss in. But we're seeing a multitude of things, right? We're seeing cool season grass plantings. We're seeing native warm season grasses and wildflowers and everything like that. And so, you know, water quality practices like filter strips there along creeks, and so it's just great to see on the ground, and you notice it more as you dive into the field, you know, just driving around, seeing like, oh, that's probably CRP, and so it's just fun to see. But we can go up to the next slide. So when we look at soil health and the impacts that we're doing at soil health, I kind of first like to look at that second bullet point, and I like to keep that in mind for, you know, the whole state, right? We're looking at soil that is extremely productive when it comes to agriculture. You know, some of it's not as well drained as others. A large, you know, majority of the state is tile drained. But when we're looking at soil health, we have really good soils. And so some limiting factors to that soil is from the management and the way that we do, you know, put tillage practices on the ground, all the amount of passes that we do that break up the soil structure. You know, today we're getting, you know, I think anywhere from a quarter to a half inch of rain. So seeing how fields that are, you know, under conventional tillage versus no-till fields, how they're taking that water, you know, and getting it down to where it needs to go. Management definitely plays a huge role into the soil health here in my county specifically. You know, again, with tillage, you get that lack of cover in the winter, areas of ponding, you know, just due to that lack of soil structure, you're just breaking it over and over again. And so, you know, some things that we're kind of putting into place to fix that, or people are interested in doing is an uptick. Definitely cover crops. There's so many different funding pools, whether it be for the Partners for Conservation Fund, the EQIP program through NRCS, or people just genuinely interested in just wanting information to just try out a small piece. Is definitely something that's big. Getting somebody to take a pass out, you know, from tillage, whether it be in the spring or the fall, or, you know, CRP is again a good product and a good program that people are interested in to try to reduce that management that they're doing and try to improve their overall soil health, their overall soil structure, and try to solve those resource concerns that we're having here in Knox County. But we'll go ahead to the next slide here. This has a good example. I drive past this every single day. So you can see we're going to look at the field that's on the south of the road there, off Knox Highway 10. This field, you can see the mapping units similar to those on the last slide. They're silt loams. They're very productive soils. I'm sure this field's very productive. We can see that we're green in this picture, so we're in the growing season, but kind of up there towards the top in that 86B, you're seeing those lighter green spots. And, you know, I wish I had a picture. I took a picture during last growing season, you know, knowing I was doing this presentation. But I can tell you that those spots were ponded. Those spots water wasn't getting in, and that this field is under conventional tillage. And so, you know, we're seeing an evidence of it as you drive around, and you're seeing the effects that management can have on our soil health and our soil structure. So it's kind of like it's how we can get producers to think about these things is kind of the ultimate question. How do we get them involved in these practices? Most likely a farmer wants to listen to a farmer. They, not necessarily want to listen to us. But like I said, kind of similar with CRP, it's folks that are seeing their neighbors and seeing the benefits from their neighbors, and doing field days and getting farmers out talking about it and just educating them. We're not here to necessarily sell conservation as much as we are to educate and allow farmers to make the best decision that they can for their management and for their overall farm operation. You can go to I believe this is my final slide here. This just has some of my contact information if anyone wants to get in touch with me. Just some final touches here. This coming up on 2 years has been such a great program for me to be a part of. It's allowed me to dive into a new field, see how important our soil is, and provide our producers and our landowners and our future generation with the knowledge of conservation and with the impact that it can have in preserving our lands for the future and for the time to come. But thank you all, and appreciate presenting today.
Thank you, Tim. Yeah, we're really grateful that you're a part of our team, and thank you so much for all the great photos and information that you shared. Our next presenter actually worked on my fruit and vegetable farm several years ago while she was in college, and I was truly impressed by her work ethic back then. And I know she's continuing to deliver exceptional results for the farmers that she's working with today. I think at least one of her colleagues is on the call with us right now, so she'll be talking about them as well. I'm excited to introduce Scott County Conservation Planner Courtney Lercher.
Good morning, everyone. I'm very happy to be here presenting the work that I do in conservation. Like Hannah said, my name is Courtney Lercher, and I'm the IDOA Conservation Planner in Scott County. I grew up in a small town in southern Illinois called Trenton. It's a very rural area, but I didn't have the typical farming experience. I'll touch on that a little bit later. In 2019, I continued my education at Illinois College, where I double majored in environmental studies and wildlife management and agribusiness management. I graduated in 2023 with a Bachelor's of Science and continued living in Jacksonville. I now live in South Jacksonville with my boyfriend and 2 cats, and I'm currently enrolled at Western Illinois University taking an introductory soils class to further my education in conservation. Next slide, please. So like I said before, I didn't grow up on a farm, but I was involved with FFA in high school, and I raised ducks, chickens, and geese as a hobby. My interest in conservation didn't really start until the summer of my freshman year in college. That summer, I did an internship with a local organic and sustainable farm called Moongrow Farm in Pleasant Plain, Illinois. And during that internship, I became really interested in conservation and agriculture. Little did I know that during my last semester of college, I would get the opportunity to join the AIM Capacity Building Initiative and pursue a career in both ag and conservation. And I started this position in February 2023, and I've been a conservation planner for 2 years and 1 month. Next slide, please. So on this slide, you can see a picture of me and my 2 coworkers in the office, Lance and John Ford. So I primarily work with Lance Mueller, who is the Soil Water Conservation District RC in my office, and I occasionally assist NRCS with various projects. My typical workload in the office includes helping with surveying, CRP status reviews, making CRP plans, modifications on conservation plans, and other day-to-day activities as needed. I also assist SWCD and NRCS in the Morgan County office when needed. Collaboration in the office is extremely important and beneficial for the type of work that we do. The main benefit of collaborating with other partners and organizations is the knowledge we share with one another. Each person I work with has had different experiences in working in conservation and agriculture, so I'm constantly learning new skills and working on new projects. Working with a group of diverse partners and specialists has allowed us to create one-of-a-kind conservation plans for each project. As you can probably imagine, collaboration on projects is a daily activity in our office. Specifically, during CRP status review season, I work side by side with SWCD in the CRP process. We evaluate fields together, work on recommendations for management with FSA, and send out status reviews for producers to sign and return to the office. We both have our own role in each step of this process and work together in this capacity Working together in this capacity has increased productivity and allowed for us to stay on track during a very busy time of year. Our office also collaborates with Morgan County office, and together our offices host the yearly Envirothon for local schools and have a fall and spring fish sales each year. So now I'll talk a little bit about resource concerns and producers in our county. Resource concerns vary throughout the county, and with each producer, there are heightened concerns regarding soil. From my experience, producers are typically facing challenges with erosion, drainage, runoff, and other soil-related concerns. On occasion, we will have producers interested in improving wildlife habitat on their land too. Our office has been working diligently with producers on federal and state projects like EQIP, CSP, and PFC to help reduce erosion, poor drainage, and compaction. With the size of our county, we have been making a really great effort to spread the word on these programs to our producers. Our SWCD has been advertising through their Facebook page and local newspapers, and of course, information has spread through word of mouth, so we've been getting a lot more interest in conservation practices and programs in the last couple of years. Next slide, please. Some conservation practices we see in our office are conservation cover, sediment and controlled basins, and underground outlets, and cover crops, just to name a few. We have seen positive impacts such as improved soil health, less erosion, and better drainage across fields. There have also been noticeable improvements in wildlife and habitat for wildlife and for recreational activities like hunting in areas where CRP has been implemented. When thinking about the uniqueness of our county's projects, two things come to mind. First, our district grouping is very engineering heavy. In Scott County, we survey often and create a lot of sediment and controlled basins for producers. It seems like once a producer implements a conservation practice like this, they come back to implement more practices with similar benefits. Second, I would say each project is different. We have very diverse operations around our county, from livestock to specialty crops, so you never know what you'll be working on next. Next slide, please. So moving on to soil health. When it comes to challenges in the soil, Scott County has some very sandy soils in the bottoms, but rich clay soils in other areas. This can be difficult for producers to implement certain practices onto their fields. There isn't a one-size-fits-all solution to challenges in the soil, but luckily we have assistance from SWCD, NRCS, and other partners to help find a match for each producer's soil and farming system. There are several conservation practices that have a big impact on soil health. The ones that come to mind are no-till or reduced tillage, conservation cover, and cover crops. Each of these practices helps preserve soil health in fields, but choosing a practice depends on the producer's objectives and the resources they have available to them. It's important to find a practice that checks all the boxes for producers and doesn't put more strain on their overall operation. It is also helpful to highlight the resources we can provide for them. We're with them every step of the way and can help ensure that practice adoption goes smoothly. In my experience, producers seem most ready to adopt practices that improve the erosion and soil in their fields. Erosion can cause a variety of issues in an operation, but luckily there are many practices that can improve erosion conditions. This can be anything from no-till to cover crops to building dry dams to help resolve these resource concerns. I would also note that producers seem more open to trying practices that they've seen successfully implemented by neighboring producers. Additionally, there appears to be growing interest in nutrient management practices, so we hope to see an increase in adoption of this practice in the future. Next slide, please. So just to wrap things up, I want to say that the work conservation planners do in the office varies depending on location and partners involved, but it is clear we all have the same goal: to help producers and to get conservation on the ground. Working as a conservation planner has allowed me to continuously learn new things, develop new skills, and work with some amazing producers and partners. And next slide, please. And I just would like to say thank you again for having me. And if you have any questions or comments, feel free to reach me at any of these email addresses or stop in at the office.
Thank you so much, Courtney. A great presentation. And next, our final presenter just received his degree in conservation management. So I know he's going to talk about that a little bit. And his district has a ton of CRP acreage. So I know his colleagues really appreciate all the assistance he's provided with those contracts in Adams and Hancock County. So I'm looking forward to this final presentation by Andrew Parks.
Thanks, Hannah, and good morning, everyone. And thank you for all of you for taking the time to attend today. And thank you, everyone, for that made this possible. Like Hannah said, my name's Andrew Parks. I'm the conservation planner for the Capacity Building Initiative, working out of the Quincy Field office, and I cover Adams and Hancock counties. Just a little bit of background on myself. I was born and raised in Quincy, and I live on my family's farm about 20 minutes east of Quincy with my wife and 14-month-year-old son and our dog. My family's farm has been in our family since the early 1950s. The property's a mixture of hay fields, row crop production, and mature hardwood timber. We mainly use the farm for recreation, but we do have a tenant farmer that's involved with the hay and row crop production. So I have been on the farm quite a bit throughout my life, and but haven't really been heavily involved in the ag side of everything, but have been really interested in the outdoors. Um, so that led me to study conservation management at John Wood Community College that's based out of Quincy. But they actually have a facility, an agricultural facility in Bayless, Illinois, where I attended all my classes. And that's really where I got my formal introduction to conservation. Um, in 2023, I joined the Capacity Building Initiative, and prior to this position, I worked for the Quincy Park District, where I helped maintain the parks and open space for recreation facilities throughout our community. And before that, I lived in the Lexington, Kentucky area, and I worked for the University of Kentucky, where I helped maintain their campus. And the campus also had an arboretum there that we took care of as well. So that was really neat. So the my realm of conservation prior to this particular role with the capacity building initiative was a bit different, but um, same end goal uh, in conserving our natural resources. Next slide, please. In the Quincy Field office, we have an NRCS staff that consists of like soil conservationist, a soil conservation technician, NRCS engineer, and SWCD administrative coordinator, resource conservationist. And we also have Pheasants Forever, Quail Forever, senior farm bill biologist, and myself. And in the Carthage office, field office, we have the NRCS's district groups, district conservationist, and another soil conservationist, and an um, soil and water conservation district administrative coordinator and resource conservationist. It's great that we can all collaborate as a team when needed for all the projects that take place here. But typically, the NRCS and SWCD staff will be working on projects where the engineering is required. So then the Pheasants Forever and Quail Forever senior farm bill biologists and I work closely day to day on anything that is related, whether it's doing related to CRP, whether it's doing establishment or maintenance status reviews, suitability and feasibility assessments, or inventory and evaluation for CSP or EQIP projects that will have wildlife or habitat practices incorporated into that project. And once the time of year rolls around that we're going to be putting conservation plans together for CRP, that workload's usually divvied up between myself and the administrative coordinator and resource conservationist for the soil and water conservation districts in each county. Um, and it's great that we can all work together seamlessly and bounce ideas off of each other and get projects completed in an efficient manner. Um, it was just this morning we had a producer come in and had some issues with figuring out what he needed to do for interseeding on a pollinator plot, and it ended up being kind of a two-person job to where me and the soil conservationist kind of hashed it out and got everything lined out for him so he could get the right interseeding done for CRP. Next slide, please. And here in Adams County and Hancock counties, and like was said earlier, probably pretty typical across the state, that the resource concerns we see is the sheet and rill erosion or ephemeral gully erosion. And when we meet with landowners and we view the issues on the property, try to help them choose the best management practices based on their personal objectives, their financial, physical, mechanical capabilities, and along with choosing a program that's best suited for the landowner and the issues that they're facing on their property. And as you can see on this slide here, it shows the differences in those types of erosions. And there's several different, or there's many different ways to combat those types of erosion. And we're just asked to find the perfect solution to try to conserve that soil the best ways possible. Next slide, please. Over the past 2 years, I've gained knowledge and expertise needed to assist the landowners while becoming an asset to IDOA and NRCS and the SWCD in each county. We've put together a couple outreach events and to where we're establishing good working relationships with landowners. And the picture on the left here is me presenting at a diner in rural Adams County where FSA, their county executive director, presented, and Pheasants Forever, Quail Forever, Farm Bill biologist also presented along with myself. We had 2 informational sessions about CRP with question and answers to follow. And each of those meetings, we had about 40 attendees. So we had a pretty good turnout, and it was a really good way to meet the landowners and ask the questions that they had. And the picture on the right is Nicole Cook, the Adams County SWCD ACRC, and I at the Adams County Fair, where we both worked the booth every night, day or night of the fair, and we got attendees involved in a soil painting of Illinois that is now hanging in our office. So that was another way to touch base with the people in Adams County and kind of spread the word of conservation and what we do, and actually get to some face-to-face time with them. Next slide, please. The common conservation practices are listed here that I deal with quite a bit. As I mainly deal with CRP, the biggest one that the conservation practice that I work with has got to be conservation cover. We have plenty of contracts that utilize other practices such as filter strips, riparian buffers, upland wildlife habitat management, and I always try to suggest cover crops when that's ever applicable. And with Adams and Hancock counties having nearly 2,000 active CRP contracts, we're taking marginal ag land out of production and giving landowners a specified annual income while reducing erosion, promoting soil health, and decreasing water degradation by increasing organic material and living roots in the soil. That's also helping with minimizing disturbance, increasing diverse vegetative cover, which will also increase the quantity and quality of food cover and shelter for wildlife. And the picture on the top left is a pollinator plot that I visited in Adams County. And as you can see, it's directly adjacent to a row crop production field. And the bottom left picture is a picture of a filter strip in Hancock County that runs along a drainage ditch. Um, and that water that runs through that drainage ditch is um, going to run straight into the Mississippi River. So it's pretty important to have those filter strips or those practices implemented where we can try to keep our water as clean as possible. Next slide, please. And the next slide is going to I'm going to touch on some of the soil health and that we deal with here in Adams and Hancock counties. With us being located on the bluffs of the Mississippi River and having the Illinois River not too far to the east of us, both counties have areas that are in the Mississippi River watershed and other areas that are in the Illinois River watershed. And the topography can be fairly rough in areas, and there's no shortage of streams, creeks, ditches, or small rivers within both counties. And with these naturally occurring factors coupled with some highly erodible soils, we've got some opportunities and challenges in implementing the best conservation practices that are available. And with the living roots in the soil, vegetative cover, minimal disturbance, and maximized biodiversity, we can turn those challenges into success stories. And I have spoken with farmers over the past couple of years about putting conservation practices to work on their farms. And my takeaway from them is they really want to be familiarized with the conservation practices that may need to be implemented on their farm and want to see physical results. So, like those field days and outreach events, and just touching base with the community and the people that we work with is really, really, really important, I think. Next slide, please. And in conclusion, one of the biggest lessons that I've learned in the past 2 years as a conservation planner is this industry is ever evolving. And I have to continue to listen and learn and stay up to date with new conservation practices and ideas so I'm able to continue to assist the landowners and continue to conserve the natural resources for years to come. And really look forward to doing that. And if you guys have any questions or need anything from me, my contact information is there on the last slide. And thank you all for attending, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you, Andrew. And again, if you have any questions, feel free to pop them in the chat. But I've got a few that I can get us started with. We'll start with Tim. So what is your biggest success story with a farmer?
Yeah, I think I kind of touched about it a little bit on it in my presentation, and kind of funny that that came up. Just kind of looking at some emails that I got. Him putting in a new warm season grass planting and establishing. He decided, when we first did the contract, he's a little weary about it because he's never done it. But I talked to him about the benefits of prescribed fire, and he decided to go with that, with the notion that we could change that. And I just saw that there was some information about Pheasants Forever putting on a prescribed fire event that I'm, shortly after this presentation, going to send him the information for, so he can try to get out there and get educated about it. So, that working with that producer with Neighborhood Farms and how that got tied into our annual meeting has definitely been one of my greatest success stories for taking somebody who, didn't do anything. He wasn't involved in the row crop. Giving them, conservation on the ground and continuing to educate them.
Okay, great. How about you, Courtney? Would you like to share yours?
Yeah, so most of my work involves with CRP plans. So what comes to mind is the producers that come in with issues getting their native or warm season plantings to properly come up. Primarily, this is due to the excess weeds and invasives that block the growth of those desired species they're looking for. So in these situations, producers will come into our office and we'll work with them on management options to control these species. And there's been some cases that after a producer initiates the management that we've suggested, we can go out to the field and we just see a complete change. It's a really awesome feeling to see a project succeed and meet the producer's expectation, especially in those fields that are overgrown with weeds and invasive species, completely transform into a native planting that wildlife and pollinators can enjoy.
Yeah, I'm sure it's really rewarding to watch that whole process unfold. And Andrew, how about you?
Mine's on the similar with Courtney's. I would say it was another native warm season grass planting, tall grass, and it was the first year that I was here, and this gentleman was having issues, or thought he had issues. So I went out and did several site visits, and it was very obvious that there was a lot of weeds, and the planting may or may not have failed, and just kept up with him and worked with him to get some of those weeds under control. And uh, the following year, it came up, and all the warm season grasses started coming in, and it choked out a lot of those weeds. And actually went out there last summer, and it looked wonderful. And it, like Courtney said, it's really fulfilling to see something through as far as the project goes.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you for sharing. It looks like John McNally sent in a question. What are some of your best strategies for building relationships with farmers, and how do you get them interested in trying new things on their farm? So Tim, we'll start with you again.
Yeah, I think that's kind of one of the biggest questions that and challenges that we face on a daily basis. I think some of the best strategies for me just comes to listening to the producer. They're going to tell you what they want, kind of what their comfort level is, and then in the course of listening, we can kind of poke and prod and maybe put a couple pins in as far as conservation. Maybe they come in with the idea of wanting to sign something up for CRP, and then they talk about some other struggles they're facing in within their crop fields, and you can kind of listen and key in on that, and maybe put some other ideas into their head and just get them thinking. I think one of my biggest things I like to do is I love when people come in the office and I can talk to them in the office, but I think getting them out on their field, on their property, and walking it with them and actually physically seeing it is something that can be extremely impactful, and especially when it comes to getting them to try new things.
Yeah, I bet actually being there is really helpful, just being able to see the land and walk it with them. Courtney, how about you?
Yeah, I was going to say the same thing that Tim said. It's super helpful to go out there and walk the land with the producer because you really get to see their goals and listen to what they're having issues with. Yeah, I would say the most important is to listen to them, learn from them. Like Tim said in his presentation, we're not here to necessarily sell conservation. We're here to educate and help producers the best we can.
Yeah, I really like that phrase. That's a great idea. We're not here to sell conservation, we're here to educate. And Andrew, how about you?
I'm going to go along with Courtney and Tim on this. It is very beneficial to get out on the producer's farm and listen and see what their objectives are, and you can see what their capabilities are, and best uh, prescribe or put the idea out there for the conservation practices that you think would work. And um, as far as trying to get them to incorporate new conservation practices, I think that first of all, I myself have to be educated in those practices to where I can convey that information to them uh, properly so they can get a clear picture of how that could be beneficial for them. And outreach events are great, I think, in getting people involved and kind of you'll have face-to-face time with them and be able to explain the benefits of those new practices.
Yeah, I know you've had quite a few outreach events that you mentioned in your district, so that's really helpful as well. And how about what are the most valuable lessons you've learned from your colleagues? Tim, we'll start with you again.
Yeah, I think it kind of touches back on how I answered the last question is really just taking your time with each producer, right? We're not pushing out products and pushing people through the door and getting the chance to listen to them and hear what their goals are, and really build a connection with them, because that's something that can last, and that's something that can help us continue doing the work that we're doing on their farm and on others as well.
Okay, great. How about you, Courtney?
One of the most important things I learned was ask questions. Don't be afraid to reach out to other partners or specialists for help on a project. This is a job where you're constantly learning new things. More often than not, you're not going to know everything. That's why we have so many partners and area specialists involved with the planning process. There's nothing wrong with telling a producer, you know what, I'm not sure. Let me reach out to our specialists, do some research, and then I'll get back to you. It's important to utilize our partners and specialists to ensure the producers are getting the best possible conservation plans from us.
Yeah, it's definitely helpful to have a lot of specialists involved in the work. Andrew, how about you?
I'm kind of gonna mirror what Courtney said. I think it's really important to have everyone involved and to uh, involved in the process. That way, you're not just by yourself, and there you get a couple heads thinking about the same issue, and you might come up with different conclusions, and you can draw up a strategy from there. So listening and learning is definitely a key for me.
Yeah, definitely. And what was the most challenging part, excuse me, about receiving your level 3 certification? Tim, we'll start with you again.
Yeah, I think we're all probably going to share the same sentiment here. The RMS plan at the end and putting together that full resource management system, looking at every resource concern and dealing with practices that you might not be familiar with, and how to plan those, and working with your area staff back and forth. The final step, the RMS plan, was definitely the most difficult.
Courtney, would you agree with that?
Yep, I completely agree with that. It was pretty challenging, very time consuming, but I also thought it was kind of fun because we got to do a lot of research on different resource concerns.
And Andrew, how about you?
Yeah, I would agree. I would agree that the RMS plan was probably the most challenging portion of getting that certification. And also agree with Courtney. It was fun and to learn. I always enjoy learning about new things, and in the end, it makes us more valuable uh, to the farmers and to as an employee.
Thank you. Looks like we've got a new question from Olivia. What do you guys think are the most important conservation practices regarding the nutrient loss reduction strategy? Tim, we'll start with you.
Yeah, I think any practice towards further, like looking at implementation in our county. Filter strips definitely play a big role. We have the Spoon River that comes here through Knox County, and that runs into the Illinois River. So trying to keep the nutrients from running off the field. But when you look at things like nitrates that are leaching into our tile and going through, and getting emptied into our water sources, looking at something that can intercept that, like a saturated buffer or even a bioreactor. our Soil and Water actually is having the opportunity. It's a program that's been going on, I believe, in Wisconsin and Iowa already, but they're the pilot in the state for putting together some batch and build programs for specifically saturated buffers and bioreactors. I think about 10 projects here in the county, so that'll be fun to see how that goes forward and kind of learn. Right, it's a new practice for me, and kind of like in the previous answers that Andrew and Courtney gave. It's always fun to learn and dive into these new practices.
Yeah, that's great to hear that they're doing some new work on that. Courtney, how about you?
Yeah, I agree with Tim. I think those buffers are really helpful, and one I don't have a ton of experience in, but I really want to start getting into in our county is the nutrient management aspect of it. I think controlling what farmers are putting onto their fields, not necessarily controlling, just monitoring what they're putting onto their fields will really make a difference with the nutrient loss reduction strategy.
Yeah, definitely. Andrew, how about you?
Think that it is a multitude of practices that are really beneficial to help with the nutrient loss, and you could group these practices together and make even a bigger impact, say like cover crops and filter strips and nutrient management plans, um, especially cover crops, because that in turn is going to give you, you're going to have the nutrient management plan, because you're not going to need as much nutrients because of the green cover that you have. And obviously, that's going to affect your non-point source um, discharge into the streams, rivers, and creeks. So yeah, I think it could be, there's a lot of practices that could fall under that umbrella.
All right, thank you. We've got a question from Grace. It says, did you guys have to do 3 RMS plans with one being a grazing RMS? Oh, Tim, we'll start with you. Sorry.
Yeah. So we were all part of the same training class. We had to submit 2 full RMS plans, and then a progressive plan. So that's something that's maybe looking at just one specific resource concern. Nothing. I think none of my plans specifically involved grazing, but that's certainly something I think we could have done if that was a resource concern, or the producer that you were working on, that was something they had a cattle production, but we weren't required to do grazing. So maybe it is kind of a geographic based on the areas of what's required.
And Courtney, how about you?
Yeah, we just had to do 2 full RMSs with one including progressive options. I did not personally do a grazing plan with mine.
And Andrew?
I was in the same boat as Tim and Courtney. I didn't have any grazing management, and just did the 2 full RMS plans and one progressive plan.
Okay, thank you. We've got a question from MJ from the Savannah Institute. She asks, have you seen interest in specific agroforestry practices? If conservation planners feel unequipped to do agroforestry designs, what could help? And Tim, we'll start with you again.
We've seen definitely a big uptake when it comes to NRCS workload in forestry management plans, and getting the forester involved. Not necessarily a full, agroforestry plan or design. I think something like a field day or some information session for farmers or something would definitely benefit both myself and producers in the area, just to familiarize themselves with those practices and what that looks like.
Okay, how about you, Courtney?
Yeah, same as Tim. We have some forestry management contracts, but nothing specifically agroforestry related. It would be really great to have some producers out on a field day to inform them that they're available, or even put up some flyers in the office just to get the conversation going.
And how about you, Andrew?
I feel the same way. I think that it would be beneficial for conservation planners and producers to have some uh, one-on-one time or FaceTime with some agroforestry practices that have been implemented. I haven't seen any specific agroforestry practices here in Adams and Hancock counties, but like Tim and Courtney said, there are some forestry management plans that are in place right now.
Okay, thank you for sharing that. And what is your favorite part of the job? Tim, we'll start with you.
I I definitely love getting out in the field. You know, we have a lot of paperwork behind the scenes when it comes to the actual planning, but nothing's better than, you know, taking a day out in the field, and especially looking at different CRP pieces and seeing those wildflowers and seeing the success of the work that you're doing in the office actually, you know, come to fruition and be out on the landscape.
And Courtney, how about you?
Yeah, I agree with that. My favorite part's getting to work outdoors, and I specifically like to see those native plants in bloom in CRP and getting to see all the wildlife out there.
And Andrew?
I really enjoy being outdoors and doing the establishment reviews or the maintenance review, status reviews. I really like working with a landowner or producer that is genuinely interested in conserving the natural resources. That is, it makes it really pleasurable to get those practices on the ground and see them take place.
Yeah, definitely. I bet that it's very rewarding. Um, can you share a story of a conservation project that didn't go as planned and what lessons were learned from that experience? Tim, we'll start with you.
Yeah, we've definitely had a couple. Yeah, these were projects that kind of looped into after I had started, but they were ongoing, and some producers taking on, you know, building their own grass waterways, and the struggles that come with that. Right, it's a difficult engineering is not easy by any feat. So, you know, we've had some producers struggle to build their own. Grass waterways and actually end up doing a little bit more harm to the landscape than good. And so that's been a couple struggles that we've had here in the office that I can think of.
And how about you, Courtney?
Yeah, I think what comes to mind is some bumps in the road with CRP, whether it's just we should have curated the seeding rate or what types of plants we were required to be seeding out there. And that just all comes out to doing your research with soil. So if we have a producer that had wanted to plant a certain type of CRP and we look up their soil isn't compatible with that, you know, we just go back into the system and resources and we'll look up a seeding plan that matches what they want and that matches their soil type.
Great. And how about you, Andrew?
Mine's kind of along the same lines as what Tim had said. There was a gentleman that had a waterway here in Adams County that wasn't done quite right and ended up causing quite a bit more erosion, or it failed. So we had to do some redesigning, or NRCS had to do some redesigning and get that constructed in an appropriate manner, and seems to be working fine now.
Okay, great. And I think we've got time for one more question. So do you plan to continue working in conservation agriculture, and what are your long-term goals? Tim, we'll start with you.
Yeah, absolutely. Like this has been quite a career shift for me. You know, I had a background in history and just some, you know, being where I am in the state, you know, agriculture is all around us, and so conservation is definitely something that I want to stay with. You know, whether that's working for NRCS, you know, I am kind of working towards pushing forward my education to get it to where it needs to be to work for NRCS or, a soil and water opportunity. I'd be happy with either of those. Stay in the public sector and keep helping the public put conservation on the ground is kind of my goals.
Great, it's wonderful to hear that. Courtney, how about you?
Yeah, I definitely plan on continuing to work with conservation. Like Tim, I'm in a soils class now to try to get into NRCS and, take what I've learned here and use it in the future with the same groups of people I've been working with.
Great, and how about you, Andrew?
My plan is to continue my career in conservation. I'm extremely happy with this position right now and look forward to what the future has to hold.
Great, well, thank you everyone for joining us today. And this is being recorded, so the recording will be made available. I'll follow up later on. It will be on our YouTube channel, I believe. And I believe the Illinois Stewardship Alliance is planning to share it on their YouTube channel. But I hope everyone enjoys the rest of their Soil Health Week. And thanks again for joining us.